And welcome to In the Light, Growing Your Soul with me, Anna Isabel. And my guest today is Douglas Hodgson, who's written a great book called Spiritual Revelations from Beyond the Veil. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Anna. And it's great to be with you and your audience. Thank you for having me on your show.
Well, it's rather an irresistible topic, spiritual revelations from beyond the veil. So tell us, how are these spiritual revelations being communicated?
How are they being communicated? Right. Before I begin, Anna, I'd like to set things in context with a few quotations. The first one I'd like to take is from the French philosopher Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. And he observed that we are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. The other quotation I'd like to share with you and your audience is from Taoism, the Tao Te Ching, from chapter 50. And it goes something like this: life is a venturing forth, death is a returning home. Why do I recite these quotations? Because to my mind, at least, they really encapsulate the pure essence of the NDE experience in the messaging. So how are these messages communicated? Well, I can give you a long-winded answer or a very concise one. But basically, these are people who have been declared clinically dead in most cases. Their heart has stopped functioning, their vital signs are nil, they have flatlined, and they are actually clinically dead for 2, 3, 4 minutes. And they claim to have undergone what we call a near-death experience, in which their soul or consciousness or spirit or life force, if you will, leaves their body. It's released. As one NDEer said, it's like the heavenly umbilical cord is severed and it departs the physical body. Because after all, we are simply borrowing the physical body for the purposes of our earthly incarnation. It doesn't belong to us. But the soul consciousness finds itself floating above the body. It is surrounded by what is described as a dark, velvety substance. But there's a feeling of warmth and security. It's almost like being cocooned in warm light. And suddenly, a pinprick of white light appears far off in the distance. And slowly but inexorably, the soul or the consciousness, drawn like a magnet, is traveling towards the light. And it picks up speed at an exponential rate. And some describe it as going down a dark tunnel. Others describe it as going through a long, dark, deep valley. But eventually they arrive at the threshold and they see a horizon of golden white light. But there is usually a barrier, and the barrier can consist of a doorway or an archway or a gate or a stream, a pond. And that is what I refer to as the veil. And they are met at the veil with beings of light, or some refer to it as the light, some refer to it as God or the source. Others report meeting deceased relatives or friends who are beyond the veil, but they just know who they are. But the being of light says to them, you cannot cross over. You cannot cross through the veil, because if you do, you cannot go back to your earthly life. Your soul cannot re-enter the physical body. But the soul consciousness by this point is feeling feelings of euphoria, bliss, peace, joy, gratitude, acceptance, and it doesn't want to go back. But the being of light will typically tell the soul that your earthly mission is not yet finished. You have more to complete. It may be responsibilities of a family nature, or it might be a broader, a more significant mission of being a light worker or what have you. At the veil, the soul or consciousness receives what many refer to as infused knowledge. As one NDE said, it's like being plugged into a universal data structure or plugged into a universal consciousness. You have elevated awareness and expanded consciousness and rising levels of all-knowingness or omniscience. And the beings of light will say, you must return, but when you return to your earthly life, you must take back with you the messages and revelations and teachings you have received by us at the veil, and you must share them with humanity for humanity's benefit. So that's basically the process of how they receive the revelations.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you now want me to tell you and your audience how I found these revelations or what.
Yes, I'm just thinking about the process because this
Mhm.
is fairly universal experience that you're describing um, amongst people who've experienced had near-death experiences, as I've heard as well. So, is there anybody whose near-death experience is different that you've come across?
Is different in what respect?
Because it seems to be a very tiny minority of individuals whose near-death experience is a frightening experience.
Mhm.
So, have you come across those in your research?
Yes.
So,
Yes, I have.
tell us about that and tell us why you feel, or that for this small amount of individuals, their experience is different from that of the others.
Well, that's a very good question. I'll do my best to answer it. Everything happens for a higher purpose, according to the NDEs. There are no coincidences in life. So the fact that a relatively small portion of NDEs had what might be termed a dark or negative experience is not necessarily a bad thing. It may be reassuring for the soul. It is for the soul's edification and evolution. I must declare my interest here, Anna. When I was researching this book and scouring the archives of the International Association for Near-Death Studies, I was focusing on the positive experiences overall and trying to include in my book as much positive energy as possible. But I did run across a number of negative experiences, and I'll share them with you. I classify them into 2 or 3 different types. And I would say that only about 10 or 15% at most of the experiences were negative by nature. But the first type of negative experiences where the soul or the consciousness is alone in a place of complete darkness. And they define this as hell. Hell is an absence of the presence of God or the light. So it's almost like a state of existence or being, of being alone. Another experience is what I would call being in a transitional state. I don't know whether you would call it hell or not, but for example, when the soul consciousness leaves the body, for whatever reason, it chooses not to go down the tunnel of light. It may fear going down the tunnel. It may not accept God's beauty and be reluctant to proceed down the tunnel. It may be too attached to something it has left behind in the earthly realm. It could be a loved one. It could be their home. It could be a treasured chattel, or it could be a place that they've always loved. But for whatever reason, they're too attached to it to proceed down the tunnel of light. This is what I call a transitional state. And in the West, we would call them, I suppose, disembodied spirits. And in the Eastern cultures, they might refer to them as hungry ghosts. So they're in a state of limbo. They're neither part of the earthly realm, neither are they part of the heavenly or higher spiritual realms. The third type of negative or dark experience which I encountered, I would describe as a sensory experience, particularly of sight and hearing, not quite as we experience on Earth, but the sight and hearing of the soul consciousness. And I can give two examples. One example was the soul consciousness was in the presence of a being of light. And I'm speculating here, but it could well be its guardian angel or its spirit guide. And presumably for a higher purpose, it wasn't made clear in the NDE account, but this soul was taken to a very dark place of pain, suffering, and anguish. And the soul witnessed a great wall, and on the wall, there were human torsos stuck, almost as if they had been cemented as part of the wall. And their arms stuck out from the wall, and half of their head, including their face. And the soul said that they were in utter pain, suffering, anguish. And the soul felt quite emotional at what a dire state and what a sad place this was. And the being of light was almost cocooning the soul consciousness in attentive light. And the being of light cautioned the soul. It said, if you move out from the light and move into the darkness of this place, you will never leave this place. So those were quite graphic, dark experiences that I recall. But I didn't include them in my book because, as I said, I was concentrating on the light and the positive.
Yeah,
But that
but
may well be a book for someone else.
I think it's worth looking at those because they're also very telling in terms of near-death experiences and giving us an insight into um, the matter of free will. Because I think from my perspective, when I've read these, it seems that these were people who were very much in a state of fear. Perhaps that they were afraid of what would happen after, or if they let go. So that, and I'll tell you why I think that. It's because so much of spirit communication is symbolic as well. And so, for instance, that one, the last one that you were describing with, people being stuck in the wall, etc., that is such an incredibly powerful image of the pain we are in when we step away from the light or when we are ignorant of the light. So it's reminiscent to me of the way in which those of us who are mediums communicate, with the way that spirit communicate with us in some very symbolic terms. But also, if we have free will, I can't imagine that free will would disappear the moment that our spirit leaves the body, our soul leaves the body. So we're going to either choose to go or not, which speaks to those who are too attached to leave. Mm-hmm. And we know that they exist because, people see them, experience, feel their presence. So we know that they exist. So it's again, these experiences are interesting from an NDE perspective, because they are, I think, shedding light on some other experiences that happen, where people become aware of other beings, spirit beings being around, or they might call them ghosts. So I think that's interesting for that reason too. And I do think that our feelings color our interpretation of everything. So for those who are initially experiencing that velvety cocoon, some might experience that as being very frightening and get stuck in fear as well. So it's also about how we engage. I guess what I'm saying is about how we engage with the experience as well.
That could well be, Anna. Yes.
Because the other reason I think that is because how is it that when we have sightings of, say, or engagement with Mother Mary or Jesus, where people see them, or angels, it's very culturally specific. I haven't come across a Buddhist being visited by Mother Mary. I think that they work with our consciousness and what we are aware of, and give us what we would recognize. But for some of us, fear might actually block that as well.
Yes, there is, I believe, a cultural aspect involved. Most of the NDEs that I researched referred to the light or beings of light, but a number of them, who presumably were Christians, felt that they were actually talking to their Lord Jesus Christ. There was one report or written account that referred to communicating with a Buddha-like figure. So that's fair enough. And actually, one NDE said that there's not just one heaven, there are multiple heavens. And a parallel can be found in Islam. Muslims believe that there are 7 heavens. So maybe they actually are connecting with the heaven that they have connected with during their earthly incarnations. And it goes beyond their subconscious, and they're actually connecting with the specific heaven that they are used to from a religious and cultural framework.
And also, there is another factor to consider here, and that is that we are told that our minds have the power to create. And so it could be that sometimes, again, that we're interacting with what we're being given to us, and our response is based on what we know and what is familiar to us as well. So this is another facet to it. So this is absolutely fascinating. What drove you to write this book and to do this research?
I've always been a spiritual person, Anna. I've been a Christian since my baptism as a young child. But as I've got older, I feel I'm becoming more spiritual and less religious. But I've studied the sacred scriptures of the world's mainstream religions, both Eastern and Western. And when I worked at the University of Western Australia, this is about 30 years ago, I picked up a book off the general library shelf. I don't know why, but it just happened to be there. It was Dr. Raymond Moody's Life After Life. His pioneering work into the so-called phenomenon of near-death experiences. And I read it from cover to cover and was absolutely fascinated and captivated by what I read. But being a very busy university academic, 98% of what I read was directly related to my job. And when I retired in early 2018, a whole new world opened up to me. And I got to read what I truly wanted to read. And the first book that I read upon retirement was a book by Dr. Eben Alexander, Proof of Heaven, a neurosurgeon's journey into the afterlife, in which Dr. Alexander had a deep NDE. He was in a deep coma for 7 days. And once again, that reignited my interest and fascination in the near-death experience. So I'm a curious person by nature, and I wanted to find out much more. So I found the website of the International Association for Near-Death Studies, EANS is the acronym, and they have a wonderful archives containing hundreds upon hundreds of written near-death experience accounts. So I thought, I'll start reading them and see where I get to. And after a while, no two experiences are the same. They're all unique, just as we are all unique. But I started to detect common themes, messaging, revelations. They might have been expressed somewhat differently in different nuanced language, but they were essentially saying the same thing. So I started taking copious notes and collating all of this information, and I started breaking it down into discrete chapters. And then I started to read accounts where the soul or the consciousness at the veil was told by the being of light, you must return to your body because your mission is not complete. You must share with humanity what you have learned at the veil. Share it for humanity's benefit. And at that point, the penny dropped, the light bulb went on. I thought, right, I would like to be kind of a humble mouthpiece for over 500 people who have taken the trouble to record in writing what to them, to each of them, was a very profound and life-changing experience. And what was revealed to them, I feel, was very deep and profound as well.
I recently heard someone being somewhat scathing of this view of what happens in the afterlife. And it wasn't that he didn't believe the experiences, it was that he felt that this is simply proof of why our existence is hellish, because even after we die, we are still answering to a hierarchy. And in his mind, the fact that we're looking at a hierarchy of beings is evidence of how hellish existence is. When I've been reading about or listening to people who who have these experiences, I have not once come across anyone who felt small, as in that they were being belittled. They felt small in face of the awesome energy around them, but nobody belittling them. Is that your experience too?
Well, as you say, we have free will. We can choose to believe or not to believe. And God honors and respects our choices and our decisions. But whatever we do, we will be held accountable at the soul level, ultimately. One NDEer said that each soul is no better than or less than any other soul. We are all equal in the sight of God. To some, this may be a hellish plane. The earthly plane may be a hellish existence, but we are here to learn. We are here to learn our lessons before we return home again. We are here to, yes?
Well, I was just going to ask the obvious question, which is why? The the question is, why is it important if we come from a heavenly realm, why is it important to descend into a dimension which is much denser and much harder? What is the point? This is probably one of the most asked questions we have.
We are here to learn our lessons. And once we learn all of the lessons, we have total communion with the light. There will be no need for us to reincarnate in the earthly realm. We are all on the same pathway to God or the source, but each of us have varying levels of consciousness. We're at different levels, different stages, but all of us are on an eternal evolutionary learning journey. And we, as the NDEs say, reincarnation is a universal law. And each of us have had thousands upon thousands of incarnations, either in the earthly realm or in other material or non-material realms of existence. But when we go back into the world of spirit, we are not perfect. We are not complete or whole. We still have rough edges. And that's why we keep coming back. That's the purpose of the so-called life review, the cleansing and purification of the spirit. So even as spirits, we're not complete. We still have to keep learning our lessons until we learn everything that we must learn to achieve what the Buddhists or the Hindus call enlightenment, self-realization, absorption into the light, Turiya, what have you.
Yes, I think that that's very clear that there is this element of being here for a purpose, a reason, and the reason being to learn. But I think what a lot of people wonder is why this is necessary, given that if we are spirit, we are meant to be close to God or of God. Why would it be that we would want to have these experiences? Why do we need to come back and learn when we're already supposedly perfect when we're in spirit?
We all have the divine spark within us, Anna. Many religions have sacred scriptures to that effect, and the NDEs agree that God is immanent within us. But as another NDEer said, we our soul or our consciousness contains both light and darkness. Until we purge the darkness from our soul or consciousness, we keep coming back here to learn our lessons. Of course, life can be hell to some people, even to most of us. We have many challenges, trials, and tribulations while we're here. But as another NDEer said, don't complain when you are confronted by an obstacle in your life. Consider it as an opportunity to discern the particular lessons you were sent to Earth to discover and to absorb into your soul. So, am I experiencing this relationship problem because I talk too much and listen too little? Am I too impatient? Am I not a forgiving or a kind person? So consider it a wonderful opportunity to try to make that determination, because if we become too negative, if we reach the proverbial fork in the road and choose not to embrace positive energy, but to embrace negative or darker energy, that takes us away from the light, from the higher vibrations, and indeed from what our life mission is on Earth. Each of us is sent here in each lifetime to accomplish something. And by the standards of the world, it might be very modest indeed, but for the soul, it is most significant.
Indeed. And I think that's the most important part, is to understand that everything that we experience is an opportunity for growth and for learning. And we might, in that moment of extreme anguish and pain, not be ready for that, because it's very difficult to learn unless we feel safe. But later, when things have settled, then we can perhaps look back with a bit more calm and assess what happened and how the change. Because looking back, working with clients, this is my therapist hat on now, working with clients, when we're dealing with traumatic events and they are able to move through those feelings that are residue of the trauma, or they're trapped in the trauma, when we can move through those feelings, then they begin to see that they are stronger and more, I would say, enlightened, because there's a wisdom and an understanding that has come in that is now infusing their lives in a different way. So this is the crux of it, is we have the opportunity when we are challenged to embrace understanding, and that helps us to move forward. And of course, that's not always easy. In fact, a lot of the time it feels impossible, which is why I do what I do as a therapist. It's in the nature of what I do, but it is that possibility is there. And sometimes we need help. Sometimes we need help to be able to move forward and not be stuck in pain. So this is an illustration, I guess, of exactly what you're talking about. The fact that is the purpose, is to move forward, move through it, and keep growing and gaining in wisdom, so that we are close to the light.
Yes, it is most difficult to be going through these rough patches. And we wonder, we cry out to God or the source, why is this happening? And in most cases, we aren't given an answer. But in the fullness of time, we do realize that there was a higher purpose in it after all. And as one angel said, beauty comes of all things.
Yes, indeed. Well, Douglas, thank you so much for this wonderful book and for your work in putting it together. I'm sure that everyone who picks it up is going to be very inspired. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna, for having me on to discuss my book, Spiritual Revelations from Beyond the Veil. It's been my pleasure.
I was
Thank you.
about to give the title again, but I'm going to be putting a link into that in the description box. If people want to find you, do you have a website?
No, I don't. But your listeners are free to contact me at my personal email address if they would like.
Okay, I'll put a link
I
to
think
that.
you have my email address and you can
Yeah,
share it
I'll
with them.
in the description box.
Mhm.
Good. So I I'll make sure that everyone has that. Thank you very much again, Douglas.
Thank you, Anna. Cheers. Bye-bye.
And thank you all for watching. Now, next time, we're going to be looking at how to develop your sixth sense. Until then, goodbye.